This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
This is Global Business. Hello and a very warm welcome to the show. I am Peninah Karibe. It's 9 p.m. here in East Africa, wherever you're joining us from. Thank you. Let's first look at the markets. The JSE All-Share Index in South Africa reversed early losses, rising 0.67% to 63,207 on Thursday, after strong U.S. data raised prospects of a global economic recovery. Locally, Health Minister Dr. Zweli Mkhize announced on Wednesday evening that the first batch of 1 million doses of AstraZeneca COVID-19 vaccines will be landing in the country next Monday, after the drug maker had received regulatory approval for emergency use in South Africa. Mkhize spoke as South Africa's main opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, began court action to force the government to release details of its vaccination plans. Coming up on the show tonight. Morocco begins a massive COVID-19 vaccination campaign. Taking stock of Somalia's economic prospects ahead of elections. And a look at the key conversations at Davos. Morocco is set to roll out its mass COVID-19 vaccine program on Thursday. It has already received 2 million doses of AstraZeneca's vaccine. The campaign will start Thursday, according to the Royal Palace. The vaccine will be available to Moroccans over the age of 17, with certain groups getting priority. They include security, health, and teaching staff. Around 3,000 vaccine locations have been set up. Let's get more insights from Edward Uwakbale, the founder of SciTech Africa and a contributor to Quartz and Milken Institute's COVID-19 Africa Watch. Thank you, sir, for joining us tonight. Now, COVAX is aiming to deliver 600 million vaccine doses to Africa by the end of this year. Do you think this is achievable?
That is actually a long dream. For them to be able to deliver that number by the end of the year. They plan starting with 3% for health workers, but for them to be able to deliver that number of vaccines, I think it will cross into 2022. I don't think they will be able to achieve that in 2021.
In a continent of about 1.3 billion people, is 600 million doses a good enough target for Africa?
COVAX promised 20% for the population of Africa. So when we're talking about 20% will not be enough to provide immunity for the population. So to get to provide immunity, we'll be looking at 50% above. And looking at that number, if you have to do it, well, most of these vaccines are 2 doses. And for you to give out 2 doses, if you're dividing that number, 600 million, you'll be having, it will be able to cover only 300 million. And we have a population of about 1.3 billion. I think it won't even go near to the amount that is needed. So countries will be required to look for other means to cover up that gap. I think that is where we may be having a lot of challenges, because many countries are actually mostly solely depending on COVAX for vaccines. So it will not be enough. more effort needs to be put in maybe countries having bilateral deal with pharmaceutical companies to fill up the gap.
So an initial 30 million doses is expected to start arriving in African countries by March. What are the challenges to a successful COVID-19 vaccine rollout?
Oh, the challenge will basically be government, whether the government in each country, because most times we tend to look at Africa as a single entity, which is really not the case. There are different countries, and every country has their own way of handling this situation. Like you can see with Tanzania. Tanzania is actually not doing much, and you can see a country like South Africa. South Africa has been at the forefront and have done far better than most countries in the continent. So the challenges will vary according to the countries and what the government how much the government are ready to invest in the process. So now we are looking at challenges ranging from distribution, logistics, and we'll be looking at how to get to the area where we have security challenges. Like in Ethiopia right now, a region of Ethiopia, there's a crisis going on right there, and there are people there that need these vaccines also. Then we should also look at the last mile. We're talking about the delivery process from giving it to those that need it, after passing through the processes from the state level, from the federal level or the federal government level to the state level, then to the primary health care. You know, actually, most times we have problem with the primary health care, from the primary health care to the individuals, because most times these primary health cares, they are in rural areas where we have problem with transportation. We have problem with lack of enough resources, human resources, to go house to house, to go to villages and convince these people that they need this vaccine. Then we have an issue of vaccine, whereby there's this aspect of people not trusting these vaccines. There have been rumors, stories, and conspiracies going on social media, and a lot of people do believe these conspiracies. So there's a lot of work to be done in the aspect of community engagement, convincing these people that these vaccines are safe and they should take it. If you take a vaccine to the rural area or you take it to the village, you've actually done a good job. But if those people refuse to take the vaccines, you cannot force them to take it. Right. So that is also a big challenge that most times people are not looking at. You acquire the vaccine, yes. Are they going to take it?
All right. We appreciate your insights, Edward Uwagbale in Abuja. Thank you very much for joining us. Meanwhile, budget shortfalls in government are dashing the dreams of South African medics. While Michelle Carfontaine was completing her medical training last year, the COVID-19 pandemic overwhelmed South Africa's understaffed public hospitals. So the young doctor thought she would get a job easily. But when she started applying for posts in September, there were no vacancies available. CGTN's Alexandria Majala takes up this story.
A second wave of COVID-19 in Africa's most industrialized country is far worse than the first. It has reached 20,000 daily cases earlier this month, bringing many hospitals even closer to breaking point. But for Michelle Carfontaine, a graduate doctor, a job in the sector is still out of reach. 10 of the young South Africans' job applications were rejected, and in 9 of those cases, she wasn't even invited for an interview.
So I would assume that hospitals are greatly understaffed during this time. You see it all over social media and on the news saying that doctors are under a huge strain currently, that they currently burdened with the overworkload that they're experiencing. So having more hands on board would obviously be of a benefit to the hospital, and therefore having more staff would also decrease patient waiting time and therefore increase patient care.
Sefontaine is one of scores of newly qualified junior doctors who are unable to find placements. That's despite staff shortages in the midst of a pandemic that has killed more than 40,000 people, the highest toll in Africa. According to Hire Our Medical Heroes, a campaign pressuring the government to take on more South African medical staff to tackle the pandemic, nearly 200 doctors, 325 nurses and 200 other health workers are unemployed.
Before the pandemic, there was a shortage of doctors or healthcare workers in general. And now the pandemic has even made it worse.
For newly graduated medical professionals, lack of jobs means that paying bills is a struggle.
This has put a huge burden on me financially, and having to be the sole provider for my elderly parents, it's always a means of where will my next income come from.
On the other hand, despite this lack of opportunity for recent graduates, throughout the pandemic, doctors, nurses and medics unions in South Africa have complained of being understaffed as well as having to work punishingly long shifts. Alexandria Majala for CGTN.
And as COVID-19 continues to wreak havoc across the world, businesses are struggling under lockdown rules. Consumers are either cash-strapped or too afraid to go out. These conditions have led to a boom in online trade. This has been most evident in a market like South Africa, where online shopping was subdued until COVID-19 reached its shores in March 2020. Sumitra Naidu tells us more.
Businesses were forced to close their doors when South Africa entered a hard lockdown last year. But as soon as e-commerce was allowed, there was a surge in demand online. People wanted everything from groceries to clothing delivered to them.
2016, when Attire was launched, we launched the website. And it genuinely has been a journey with both us and our clients, trying to establish our online presence, what works, what doesn't work. In our country, more than anything, we have been quite skeptical of purchasing online, but then COVID happened and it boomed. And I think more than anything, people were forced into a corner to trust online and trust that we'll deliver.
Trust has always been an issue for most South Africans. The country is also very well developed, with some of the best shopping malls and banking infrastructure across the continent. Before COVID, it was mostly the tech-savvy and time-conscious that shopped online.
2019, online retail has been sort of the abandoned family lost cousin. So retailers had the option for you to purchase goods online, but there wasn't a push. I think even if you look at your large online retailers, like your likes of your Take-A-Lot, your Loot, they were still very much in their business infancy. If you look at the collection of online retail sales, they still represented below 5% of total retail purchases.
Online demand took some big retailers by surprise. Many had to up their game and get into the online space, while others increased investment to compete.
So we went into mass production and we then started getting orders from just about everywhere in the country. Truly, COVID has had, I think, its downs for many companies, but quite an up for us, having seen an increase as well in sales from about 300 to 400% on our online store.
Almost all the retailers reported double-digit growth. Woolworths had a 151% increase in their online retail. But even with that amount of growth, it only represented about 2% of their total sales, which gives you indication of the ability and the scope of growth and opportunity within online retail.
Online retail in South Africa is expected to grow by over 2% in the next 2 years, pushing its total market share closer to 4%. It's still low compared to 15% in the US and 25% in China. But the sector got the push it needed and is now firmly on its way. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Some corporate news. In South African telco, MTN has sued the country's regulator, ICASA, over access to the 3.5 gigahertz radio frequency spectrum band. It wants the process for awarding the 3.5 gigahertz spectrum to be declared unlawful because it believes it may allow smaller operators to get all of the available frequencies at 3.5 gigahertz. The case may delay 5G spectrum auctions planned for March this year. The International Finance Corporation, the private investment arm of the World Bank Group, has given a $10 million loan to Kioo Limited to help the company weather the challenges created by the COVID-19 pandemic. Kioo Limited is based in Tanzania and is the largest producer of glass bottles in East Africa. The company, which supplies glass bottles to beverage companies, has been severely affected by the closure of bars and restaurants. A slugfest between Wall Street and Main Street took an unexpected turn. Shares of GameStop and other companies tumbled in extended trading after Wall Street Bets, a discussion forum popular with retail traders on the Reddit website, briefly turned invitation only. However, they pared those losses around an hour later and the forum opened back up. And Apple's smartphone shipments jumped 22% to record levels in the fourth quarter, making it the world's biggest seller, while those for Huawei plunged as US sanctions took effect. An expanded number of models and a new look for the iPhone 12 lineup, Apple's first 5G-enabled devices, tapped pent-up demand for upgrades, especially in China. Shipments hit 90.1 million phones, a record for any quarter, giving it global market share of 23.4%. And those are your corporate headlines. This is Global Business. Still ahead. Taking stock of Somalia's economic prospects ahead of elections. And Nigerian lawmakers pledge speedy approval of the long-awaited all-sector reform laws.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business, only on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Peninah. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Senior United Nations officials on Wednesday hailed Somalis for their resilience since the 1991 civil war. During a virtual press conference in the capital, Mogadishu, UN envoy to Somalia, James Swan, paid tribute to citizens who have persevered through tough times since fighting broke out 30 years ago. Following the ouster of President Mohamed Siad Barre, tribal warlords disintegrated the national government. During the commemoration ceremony, delegates highlighted the UN support for Somalia. The world body has been involved in humanitarian support, mediation and peacekeeping missions. Recently, the UN's mission in Somalia has been intervening to ensure national elections take place.
While enormous challenges remain and the road ahead at times looks long and hilly, it is important to acknowledge the progress that has been made. If we look at a range of measures, governance, the functioning of national and federal member state institutions, private sector investment, public financial management, delivery of services, to name a few, Somalia begins 2021 in a better place than 2011, and a better place than 2001, and a better place than the end of January 1991. I also want to stress that ultimately the work of the United Nations is an expression of objectives communicated by the broader international community.
Now, Mohammed Hussein is an economist, analyst, and joins us live from Mogadishu via Zoom. Mohammed, thank you very much for your time tonight. So let's start off with the elections that are due in just under 2 weeks. There's been some political disputes over the management of those polls. Do you think this is reason for concern?
Thank you for having me. I think Somali government, since they are going to an election, they will impact negatively the process of reforming the IMF and World Bank. Together they have agreement with the government that we have to make transparent in every sector, including the government, and government should use public financial management properly. So during these disputes in the election will impact negatively the process of reforming the financial system of the government and all the institutions and the federal members of institutions in the government. I see these things will impact negatively. Apart from that, as we all know that when there is an election, some business sectors will boom, and some other business sectors will become desperate. According to the restaurants or maybe supermarkets will not effectively function, but some hotels and accommodation mechanisms may function well since there's a lot of election, a lot of movement. Urban sector and movement sector will boom, but other sectors including the transportation, land transportation, sea transportation, and maybe restaurants and supermarkets cannot work function. So these disputes and ongoing process of disputes will impact negatively these sectors of business and the IMF agreement with the government.
Right. Looking back at the year 2020, that was really a tough year for Somalia. I mean, apart from the COVID-19 pandemic, there was severe flooding. There was, of course, the infestation of the desert locust. How much have all of these factors affected Somalia's economy?
Okay, that's a good question. Also, talking about locust, it impacted all the Somali territory, 18 regions. Some of them it left nothing for the people those are living there. Flooding impacted 8 regions, including Shabelle and Juba, neighboring regions. And 2020 was really very bad for the economy of Somalia. Apart from that, also Somalia experienced a lot of financial scams like trading, online trading, and forex trading, which has impacted negatively to the Somali community since we have experienced it. So locust and flooding and COVID-19. COVID-19 also impacted as it restricted the movement of the. We have closed the seaboats and airboats and all the movements from goodies and we're not moving from regions, far regions to the capital, and services were not open all at all. Doctors, hospitals and universities, everything were closed. So a nation like economy that had a very bad impact on the economy. We hope 2021 will be better after the election, inshallah.
All right, so talking about 2021, let's look ahead indeed. The World Bank is projecting a rebound to 2.9% this year, 3.2% next year. But then, Mohammed, we've got business owners who are very unsettled by the devaluation of Somalia's currency. They're now opting for the US dollar. How is the government addressing that?
The last decade, from 2010 to 2020, the Somali government were trying to renew Somali currency to a new level. But they have a lot of challenges, including Somali government that doesn't control the whole territory of Somalia. They cannot enforce, and as we all know, currency, if you renew currency, or maybe if you want to make currency, you need to have that kind of power. You have legal power, and you have to law enforcement. Somali government does not control the whole Somali regions and parties, so they cannot enforce people to use Somali shilling. Apart from that challenge, we have also another challenge, which is we have money laundering, very strong money laundering people, those who print money. So the Somali government cannot control those people because since they don't control the whole country, those challenges had impacted the production of new currency. So that's why they opted to use dollar. But every time, or every new government, or every new leadership, they always try to renew the currency and to get the trust of the community to that currency.
All right, Mohammed Hussein, we appreciate your time. Thank you very much for talking to us. Now, the National Assembly of Nigeria is targeting April or May this year for the passage of the highly anticipated Petroleum Industry Bill. The measure, 20 years in the making, underpins everything from oil exploration to gas pipelines and fuel regulation. President Muhammadu Buhari sent it to the Senate last September, and it passed a first reading in both chambers before the end of 2020. CGTN's Deji Badmas reports from Abuja.
The Petroleum Industry Bill has been like a jinx for Nigeria. Over 20 years, 6 general elections, 4 presidents and 8 sessions of parliament. The bill has still not been passed into law.
I think it's a shame. And it also shows how much of a depth in skills exists in the National Assembly. Without meaning any denigration, I think that most of the members of the National Assembly have absolutely no understanding of what goes on in the oil and gas industry.
But the current parliament says it is more than determined to break the jinx. It's been holding public hearings to get inputs from key players in the industry.
The preponderance of opinion in the National Assembly is that we should be able to pass the PIB. This PIB that provides passage, this time around, we should pass it.
It took us 20 years to put this together, so we had better get it right. So it's important that they do not spare any efforts in ensuring that what we come out with will not just be any bill, will be a bill that will essentially restructure and reformat the industry for growth.
Virtually everyone agrees the laws governing Nigeria's oil and gas industry need a fundamental review, but there's a strong and sometimes passionate argument on what should and should not go into the proposed law. It's partly what has caused the long delay in passing what is popularly referred to as the PIB in Nigeria.
We've had a Petroleum Act that has been in place since 1969, and we have been running this industry based on that Petroleum Act. As far as I'm concerned, the Petroleum Act of 1969 is great, and where aspects of it have become obsolete, as laws definitely become obsolete, you do not need to set up to start a completely new law, in order to just say you have done something new in the industry.
When the bill becomes law, it's expected to comprehensively change the face of Nigeria's oil and gas industry. It would also change the structure of State Oil Company NNPC and amend oil and gas taxes and revenue sharing. New regulatory agencies are expected to be created and host communities a better deal. But opinion is still sharply divided on the bill and its impact.
We need to do this as a country. We need to do it for the industry to basically chart a new course for growth. So it's commendable. I applaud all the effort being put into essentially fixing this long-running problem.
This PIB, with all the best of intentions, is just going to be a voluminous law that is not useful. Mean it will take 10 years to 15 years after passage for people who are even industry practitioners to understand or become acquainted with what the provisions are. You get the point? So at the end of the day, I think that all the hula baloo about the PIB is just a waste of everybody's time.
The lawmakers have now concluded their public hearing. The Joint Committee of Parliament is expected to collate the various feedbacks and present a clean bill to lawmakers for debate before it is passed into law. So there's still some way to go. The lawmakers have committed to giving the country a new petroleum industry law by May this year. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
Egyptian garment exporter Giza Spinning and Weaving is delaying plans for an initial public offering until at least the first quarter of 2022 due to the coronavirus pandemic. The company was looking to put up to 40% of its shares on the Egyptian Stock Exchange to obtain funds to expand its yarn and garment production capacities. From Cairo, here's CGTN's Yasser Hakim examining the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on Egypt's IPO listings.
The proceeds from the Giza Weaving IPO were to be used to finance a project worth an equivalent $16 million to expand its production. The company has already been affected by the COVID-19 outbreak and had closed down for several months. But the board decided the timing was not right to introduce the offer.
Of course, the corona pandemic is the main reason for postponing the IPO. There are reasons pertaining to the market itself and how it's affected. Foreign investors are an integral aspect in the stock market, so we must analyze how much they will pump into new shares. Also, monitor the available liquidity with individuals and institutions. Is it enough to make a successful IPO? All this is analyzed before going public.
Giza Weaving is not the only company to delay its IPO. The government has postponed its public offering of 7 state-owned companies and banks. And lately, high-end real estate developer Mr. Italia Properties has also pushed its public offer till 2022.
We postponed the IPO due to the economic contraction caused by the coronavirus. Taking such a step requires accurate assessments and transparency. The problem with this virus is that we don't know when it will end. There is no time frame, so we had to delay till the end of 2021 or next year.
The Mr. Italia Group has been trying to finance its expansion policies in the real estate market.
We were planning to release about 20 to 25% of our shares, and the reason is to raise our capital and upgrade our group of companies. This is as we transform ourselves from a family business to a public holding company in the stock exchange.
Experts say such delays by different companies can have a negative impact on the Egyptian stock exchange.
It means less products in the market, which prevents growth of our stock exchange. It also means less competition, as the number of listed firms remains the same. The effect on the company itself is that it can't raise funds for expansion or development plans, so it's forced to look for other sources of funding at a higher cost.
As the COVID-19 continues to ravage the world for a second year, it's leaving on its trail a sense of uncertainty for the business sector, the stock markets, and the overall economy. Yasser Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
You're watching Global Business, coming up after the break. A look at the key conversations at Davos. And tourism and aviation industries in the UK are worried over the new COVID-19 restrictions on travellers.
It's just taken me completely out of my depth, but at the same time it's exciting. It's new, it's different, it's a challenge.
It's really exciting.
Over the last 14 hours of rain.
How will your world change today? What happens here? What happens there? Or what you make happen for yourself? If it matters to you, it matters to us too. Your stories are the stories that need to be told. Africa Live. Find your voice.
Let's have a look at other stories making headlines today. Lawmakers in the Democratic Republic of Congo have passed a motion to remove Prime Minister Sylvestre Lukamba from office. Lukamba is an ally of former President Joseph Kabila. Wednesday's ouster handed President Felix Tshisekedi a key victory in his quest to sideline Kabila's allies. In a statement, however, the Prime Minister has termed the censure motion as politically motivated. According to the DRC Constitution, the Prime Minister has 24 hours to quit after the vote. The United Nations is warning that 8.3 million people in South Sudan are food insecure. The UN is now appealing for more funding to meet the humanitarian needs of the affected people. The United Nations says the food insecurity has been caused by intercommunal violence in parts of the country, as well as flooding for 2 consecutive years and the impact of COVID-19. And senior United Nations officials on Wednesday hailed Somalis for their resilience since the 1991 civil war. During a virtual press conference in the capital, Mogadishu, the UN envoy to Somalia, James Swan, paid tribute to citizens who have persevered through tough times since fighting broke out 30 years ago. Following the ouster of President Mohamed Siad Barre, tribal warlords disintegrated the national government. During the commemoration ceremony, delegates highlighted the UN support for Somalia. That's a look at some of the day's top stories. Samsung Electronics, the world's biggest smartphone and memory chip maker, reported fourth quarter net profits up by more than a quarter year-on-year. The profits are partly attributed to the coronavirus-driven working from home, boosting demand for devices powered by its chips. But the figures were below market expectations, and the company warned of persisting uncertainties over the pandemic, as well as lower profits in the first quarter of this year due to falling prices. Samsung Electronics is the flagship subsidiary of the giant Samsung Group. The conglomerate's overall turnover is equivalent to a fifth of the national GDP. Samsung Electronics said profits rose 26.4% in October to December on a year earlier to $5.9 billion, led by display and memory chip businesses. Russian President Vladimir Putin has addressed Day 3 of the virtual World Economic Forum. He warned that the world risks sliding deeper into instability from the pandemic and other global challenges. His concerns were echoed by top government and international organization officials. Andrew Wilson has more.
The streets of Davos are filled with snow but no people. This year's World Economic Forum took place not with helicopters and limousines, but remotely, online. Day 3 involved concerns from Russian President Vladimir Putin about the growth and influence of US social media giants.
Tech and, first of all, digital giants play an increasing significant role in society life. There is much talk about it now, especially in connection with the events that happened in the States during the election campaign.
This year's stage is set against a global pandemic resulting in more than 2 million deaths so far at a cost of at least $28 trillion to the global economy. And another year of extreme weather events that very few doubt are the result of human activity.
But we are reaching, at the same time, the limits of what climate, nature, but also the environment can cope with. So business as usual is no longer an option for my country and for many others in the same situation.
Throughout the past year, the world's weather has served only to confirm the bleakest scientific predictions about the climate changing. The reset theme throughout the forum focused repeatedly on partnership between countries, partnership between governments, but most important, better teamwork between private and public sector, and the need to go further than the Paris Agreement.
But even if we did everything that was promised in Paris, folks, the Earth's temperature is going to rise to 3.7 degrees. That's where Paris left off. And that's just because the conglomeration of all the things that people were willing to do just didn't add up to what we need to do.
Which puts pressure on the UK preparing to host that crucial COP26 climate summit in November.
But of course, it's not just public finance, it's also getting private money into tackling climate change. And the final thing I would just say on this particular issue is, of course, ensuring that we get everyone together as part of this campaign, this fight, and it's on all of us.
Even without the pandemic, 2021 was going to be a tough hill to climb. With coronavirus stalking the globe, that hill is now a mountain. Andrew Wilson, CGTN.
With the new government in the White House, there is increasing debate over whether Washington's approach to Beijing will soften. Many argue the Biden administration may continue many of Trump's policies that saw bilateral ties fall to its lowest in over 4 decades. But some hold a more positive view. CGTN Sunye has the details.
1 week into Joe Biden's presidency, a new reality for China-U.S. ties could be settling in. The Chinese ambassador to the U.S., Cui Tiankai, says the relationship stands now at a critical point and advises Washington to steer clear of the previous administration's policies.
In the past few years, some people tried to deny these basic facts by creating rumors, stoking hatred, and fanning confrontation. They attempted to hijack America's China policy and push China-U.S. relations down the precipice of confrontation. This has seriously damaged the fundamental interests of the two peoples and is doomed to failure.
Cui says he anticipates a return to normalcy in bilateral relations through a return to mutual trust.
China and the United States need cooperation, not fighting. Both China and the United States gain from cooperation and lose from confrontation. Cooperation is the only right option. It has been proved time and again that when China and the United States cooperate, we can get things done.
The Chinese ambassador is not alone to anticipate changes for the better.
The relationship has deteriorated a little bit in the last several years, but with the election of President Biden, although there will be lots of tension between the two countries, I think we've hit bottom, and we're going to start to rise and put things back together again.
The former U.S. ambassador to China suggests Biden takes small steps, like reopening the consulate shut down by the Trump administration.
The ambassadors were speaking at a panel to mark the 42nd anniversary of the re-establishment of China-U.S. diplomatic ties, and there was a general sense of optimism that the two countries are now ready to work together in the future. Sun Ye, CGTN, Beijing.
The UK has announced a new quarantine policy for visitors arriving in the country. The new measures will apply to those British nationals returning to the UK from 30 countries with a known risk of new coronavirus variants. The scheme could see visitors quarantining for up to 10 days in hotels near the airport. CGTN's Nawir Jabakil has the details from London.
Welcome to the UK. Now head to your hotel room to quarantine. That's the message facing travellers from high-risk countries who'll be told to isolate for 10 days upon arrival. It'll affect British residents coming back from places where new variants of the virus are spreading, like South Africa and Brazil.
We will introduce a new managed isolation process in hotels for those who cannot be refused entry, including those arriving home from countries where we have already imposed international travel bans. They will be required to isolate for 10 days without exception.
Under the plans, those who quarantine will have to pay for it themselves, but with most foreign visitors already banned from coming to the UK, there are worries about how effective it'll be. Some ministers wanted to go even further and put travellers from all countries in hotels.
The tourism and aviation sectors are also worried about the move. London's Heathrow Airport, which was one of the busiest in the world before the pandemic, says the plan is unnecessary and could be catastrophic for an industry that's already on its knees.
Meanwhile, on British shores, the virus rages on. The UK's official death toll has passed 100,000 and continues to rise. Around half of those lives have been lost since early November. Some of Britain's top scientists say more decisive action sooner could have prevented some of those deaths. But facing lawmakers for the first time since the milestone was reached, the Prime Minister defended his choices.
And there has been no doubt that I and the government take full responsibility for all the actions I have taken, we've taken during this pandemic to fight this disease. And yes, Mr. Speaker, there will indeed be a time when we must learn the lessons of what has happened, reflect on them and prepare.
Today's decision on travel quarantines will go under the radar when compared to the sombre national mood. The deadly cost of COVID for the UK now in the six-figure range, with little sign of slowing down. Nawid Jabakil, CGTN, London.
Virtual reality has dominated tech headlines in recent years with its ability to immerse its users in a virtual yet safe world. Gaming is one of the more well-known VR uses. However, virtual reality isn't just for entertainment anymore. And what's hot tonight, CGTN's Catherine Bajakian explores how organizations are using the technology for training purposes.
Hey, I read the article about One Roast.
This is Barry. He's an employee with concerns about his job security.
We're not going to be next, are we?
This virtual reality simulation is designed by a company called Tailspin in the United States to train managers on how to have difficult conversations with employees. And it's not the only company doing something like this. This simulation was created by audit giant PwC, which employs over 250,000 people globally. The aim is to put staff in the shoes of a marginalized person as they experience everyday discrimination.
So I can tell you right now, it's not a matter of whether it's going to be a thing in the future. Virtual reality for training purposes, and in particular soft skills training and practical skills training, is an area that's being used by organizations across different industries all over the world right now.
In 2018, businesses spent $829 million on VR. That market is expected to increase fivefold by 2023, as total investment in the technology will surpass $4 billion a year. And while some of that will be used for everyday operations, like virtual meetings, training simulations are expected to make up a large proportion of the increase. That's because VR elicits an emotional response, similar to what you experience in reality, even when it's obvious that the images aren't real.
Listen, you can give it to me straight. I just want to know what I'm supposed to tell my girls.
People responded really strongly to it. I mean, we had people cry. We had a lot of people with sweaty palms, you know, they just got super uncomfortable in the moment. And so we just thought that that was really interesting that we could evoke those types of behavioral aspects, even though everybody knew it was 100% fake, including the virtual humans, even specifically to be designed to be a little bit cartoony.
The repetition of VR training means an individual can learn 4 times faster than in a classroom, according to a study by PwC. Other sectors are also investing in this technology. This program was created in part by professors at Goldsmiths, University of London, to test if VR can train doctors on how to recognize the signs of abuse.
The idea is that before we get medical doctors to probably go out and talk to real patients, they can practice with virtual patients. So they can make all the mistakes they would otherwise make with real patients. And then they can learn from this experience. They can experience it multiple times, right? Because there is a psychological journey you go through in difficult conversations that you can actually practice. And VR really triggers all this in your body.
VR technology is still relatively new, but in the next 10 years, it is possible that work-related training will take place in the virtual world instead of in the classroom. Catherine Bajakian, CGTN, London.
Let's have a look at the commodities market. All prices slid in early trade today on fresh worries about weakened fuel demand after England clamped down on travel, and China, the world's second largest oil consumer, also sought to limit Lunar New Year trips to stem a surge in COVID-19 cases. U.S. West Texas Intermediate crude futures fell 12 U.S. cents, erasing some of Wednesday's gain, while Brent crude futures fell 16 cents after losing 10 cents on Wednesday. The market had been supported early this week by a surprisingly large decline in U.S. crude stockpiles in the week to January 22nd, which analysts said was due to a pickup in U.S. crude exports and a drop in imports. Still ahead on Global Business. A Nigerian water wellness therapy startup gains fame in Lagos.
Images may appear to be identical, but looks can be deceiving. The difference is not always obvious. It has to be discovered. There are always different sides to a story. We put the focus on the details. To see more, to understand better. CGTN. See the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. And no one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Welcome back. Whether it's to ease chronic pain and stress or just out of sheer curiosity, increasing numbers of people are taking the plunge with flotation therapy. On Grassroots tonight, CGTN's Daniel Arap Moi takes you to Nigeria, where one entrepreneur has set up the country's first flotation therapy center to boost wellness in the bustling city of Lagos.
Tayo Orekoya is preparing a client for a flotation therapy session. Orekoya's interest in the business first grew after a visit to Las Vegas. The treatment intrigued the Nigerian wellness coach so much that he decided to give it a go. And from his first session, he was hooked.
When I went on the salt, it felt magical because nobody should know how to swim. I mean, nobody should float without knowing how to swim. So once I lay on the salt, I felt like I was in space. I did not feel my weight again. I became weightless. So I thought to myself, Tayo, you need to bring this to Nigeria.
Orekoya now runs Nigeria's first flotation therapy center in the commercial capital, Lagos. The one-year-old business took about $20,000 to set up. It now has over 360 regular customers. Each float session at Flotation Therapy Lagos cost about $38, with a recommendation of over 5 sessions for a complete therapeutic experience.
Most people come in here for the purpose of meditation, apart from the wellness, the healing you get from the salt itself, but that's stillness for 45 minutes away from technology. It gives you an opportunity to meditate, and that meditation brings out great ideas from people.
Mary Ntekini has booked a 45-minute session. Ntekini, who runs a hair products business in Lagos, is on her third flotation therapy session.
I'm feeling very light and very relaxed. And during the section, I was floating in space.
Flotation, more formally known as flotation restricted environmental stimulation therapy, involves a person lying down in a sensory deprivation tank. The tanks are usually closed containers that block out light or sounds. Many floaters wear nothing other than earplugs. The water is skin temperature and filled with Epsom salt, which are rich in magnesium, a mineral in which most people find themselves deficient. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN.
A Kenyan chef based in Uganda is making face shields for a living during the COVID-19 pandemic. Jacob Omondi says the growing demand for protective gear pushed him to make the career change. CGTN's Hilary Ayesiga reports.
Jacob Omondi designs face shields out of plastic and paper. He's a chef turned craftsman.
I'm feeling more happier because when I make face shields, the person who is producing the trans paper will get his money. The person who is selling elastic is also going to get something small. The boy in Nkrumah Road who is making for me the badges will also get something small. The border person who is going to transport my face shield is going to get something. So me being in that creativity kind of life, so many people are also getting a share out of it.
Omondi employs about 5 people in his face shield business. In a day, they make about 500 face shields. The price tag for each shield is $1.05.
During this time of COVID, we could say that it has been a terrible thing to us as Ugandans, but it was like an obstacle, but we found that an obstacle, we made it an opportunity because we learned how to make masks and we could get and earn a living.
But the business faces stiff competition from other manufacturers. To keep his business afloat, Omondi markets his face shields in the community.
With the customers, he or she will see that it's hygienic, it's very clear, it's clean. You know, they will feel at home when you're transacting with them.
The Uganda government is urging citizens to follow COVID-19 guidelines by social distancing, washing hands frequently with soap, and wearing masks. And as Ugandan authorities continue to ease restrictions, health workers are also urging people to use protective gears like this one to help reduce infection rates in the country. But they are concerned that some people are ignoring the health recommendations and causing an upsurge in COVID-19 cases.
We just need to intensify our prevention measures. Already people are crowding, people are not wearing masks, they're not taking all the measures. So that is a worry, of course.
Uganda has registered over 39,000 cases and 318 deaths. The hope is that community initiatives like Omondi's face shields can help curb the spread of COVID-19 in the country. Hilary Ayesiga, CGTN, Kampala, Uganda.
Let's have a look at the currencies now. In the Nigerian Naira weakened against the greenback today. This as Nigerian manufacturers listed difficulties in accessing dollars to pay for imports as the biggest challenge in a report prepared by an association that represents their interest. The Manufacturers Association of Nigeria said its members still find it extremely difficult to source foreign exchange for importation of raw materials and machinery. And with that, we come to the end of Global Business tonight. We welcome your feedback. Send it to the contacts on the screen and follow us on our digital media platforms. I'm Peninah Karibe. Thank you for watching.